Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Counting Birds for Science, a program presented by Orange Audubon Society. I am Kathy Rigling, and I am the Education Coordinator for Orange Audubon, and we are happy to have you join us for this program. This program is presented with the support of the Cornell K-12 Education Program, which is part of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And their mission is to create innovative resources and trainings that build science skills and inspire young people to connect to their local environment, explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. So think about any community or citizen science projects that you participated in. In community or citizen science, people everywhere report observations of natural events using basic scientific protocols. And by doing this, students are engaged in authentic science. And it's really not that hard to do. These are projects in which volunteers partner with scientists to answer real-world questions. It helps scientists put the puzzle together because scientists can't be everywhere. So your observations, your students' observations do make a difference. There's a lot of different citizen science projects, not only including birds. There are types that have to deal with weather, with plants, such as Project Budburst, with insects, such as Journey North. That's the first one I ever did. Spiders, worms, you name it, you can find citizen science projects. Now, the Cornell Lab citizen science projects, which include eBird, Project Feeder Watch, Nest Watch, the Great Backyard Bird Count, and Celebrate Urban Birds, they work in this way. You identify and observe birds, you collect the data, you enter the data online, and then you're able to retrieve and view your data and work with it in that way. And your observations matter. I mean, it's real world science. Your school may discover, a species we thought no longer lived in your area. Maybe they're doing better. Maybe your school discovered that some species are in decline. It's important work. And why community science? It's exciting. It's real world. It's an opportunity to study wild animals outdoors in a safe way. It definitely sparks kids' curiosity. You teach STEM content and meet science standards. It helps the actual natural world because you're keeping track of how populations are doing. It's very motivating, and it connects students to the scientific community. And it is fun. And why birds? Because birds are everywhere. And once you start looking for them, you're going to be much more aware. When you're not looking for them, you probably are what we call bird blind. You're just not seeing them, but birds are everywhere. So it's something that you'll be able to find at your campus. And anyone can learn to identify their local birds with the help of some resources and some practice. So don't worry that you won't be able to identify birds. And if you can't identify them all, that's okay too. So we're going to talk about some things to do to help your students identify the birds and participate in citizen science. So before you do a bird count, you need to think about some things. So here are some steps to do before doing a bird count. So first, decide on a location that is available to you to count birds. You want to look for places that provide food or water or shelter for birds. And that's where you're going to be most likely to find them, such as this bush with lots of seeds for the sparrow. And decide on a time. Birds are generally more active in the morning. So if you can work out with your schedule to count in the morning, that would be ideal. But you can see birds throughout the day as well. Create a free account on eBird. eBird is a very long running citizen science project, and it's very easy to do. And you can set up a personal account or you can set up a school account, whatever it works better for you. And the account lets you access all the Cornell Labs projects, including Bird Academy, which is, there's some learning modules in there and some are free. Celebrate Urban Birds, eBird, Great Backyard Bird Count, the Macaulay Library, which has a huge amount of photos and sound recordings of mostly birds, but other animals too. NetSwatch and Project Feeder Watch. And once you have your account, you'll have one password and username to sign into any of those. And choose a bird ID resource when you're out there with your students, something to help you identify. Now we'll talk about Merlin. Merlin is a free app. It's easy to use, and it's one method that you can use to help you identify birds. But you could also use paper field guides. There's a lot out there. Here's 3 of the most well-known ones: Kaufman, National Geographic, Sibley, and Peterson. And you can actually get them very inexpensive online, like for under $15. So when you're identifying birds, these are things that your students are going to think about. You think about the size, whether it is the size of a sparrow or between a sparrow and a robin, between a robin and a crow, between a crow and a goose. And that's what you think about. You think about the kind of family of birds, and you think about, is it woodpecker type of bird? Is it an owl? Is it a raptor? Is it a waterfowl such as a duck? Is it a goose type of bird? Is it shorebird? We're missing one here. It could be a songbird too. And think about the main colors that you see when you see the bird. And I talk about to students that often the bird's not going to hang around long. So you try to be a good detective and gather all these clues as quick as you can. And when you have a whole class, they can pick up a lot of clues and they have fun. You look at what the bird was doing. Was it eating at a feeder? Was it in a pond, wading or swimming? Was it on the ground? Was it in some trees or bushes? Was it on a fence or wire? Or is it soaring or flying in the sky? Those are all good clues. If you use the Merlin app, these are the questions that the app walks you through. So the app kind of helps you eliminate possibilities and come up with the most likely birds. If you use Merlin and you put in clues, so I did this the other day and I had a brown bird that had a little bit of black, and it was size of a sparrow. And these were my choices that came up. And it gives you a little list based on where you live. And then if you find the bird, you're like, oh yeah, it was that bird. It tells you about the bird and you can click, this is my bird. As long as you already have an eBird account, you have to do that first. And then you've identified that. You could submit that finding, that single bird, to Merlin. So when you say this is my bird, it gives you 2 choices. Take me to eBird, which will have you generate a checklist, or you can save it with Merlin. And that's one way, especially if you have younger students, that you could document what birds you're seeing. If you want to do a more scientifically accurate count, you want to use eBird instead. But this is definitely an option, especially if you're first getting started. This is a good option. If you don't use the Merlin app, you could use a field guide to try to identify the bird that you see, doing the same clues. Another tip before doing a bird count is to have students become an expert about one of your local birds. and I'll give you some ideas of the types of things that they could research about them. So this is just some student work. So you would call this a focus bird. And here's some ideas. They could write the name of their species in a large font. They could do a drawing using field guides or using the internet. They could label 3 field marks. Those would be things like the bird has a circle around its eye. It has wings on, bars on its wings. It has a black tail, stuff like that. They could listen to the sounds. That's something available on the computer, and describe what it sounds like. And they could also write some natural history notes depending on their age. And so the whole idea is when you go out to count birds, each student will be really looking for their focus bird. They'll look at the other stuff, but if they see that cardinal, be like, that's my bird, and help the whole class identify it. Now, if you want to use Merlin, there's a way for you to figure out what are the most common birds in your area. And this is how you do it. And this program is being recorded, so you can go back and watch this and take your time and go through this. So if you have Merlin, you open the app. There's a spot that says Explore Birds. You click on that. At the top of that, there's a slider. And the slider says, it gives you options to set local or seasonal settings. It says, local birds. You click on that, and it's going to generate a list of the most common birds you might see at that particular time of year where you live. So here are some of Central Florida's most common winter birds. I did the same thing. I used the slider. I had it set to, you can have it set to Florida or the Southeast. And this is the birds that we'd be most likely to see. And if you're wondering what these bar charts are, this shows you when these birds are located here in Florida. Like northern cardinal is all year, while the eastern phoebe is here January, February, March, and a little bit of October, November, and December. And that'll help you. That's how you could generate your list of what the kids look up. Prior to the count date, you decide how you're going to submit your data, because submitting your data is really important. You could use Merlin like I showed you, but it's only going to record single species, not numbers of birds. You can't put how many bluebirds you saw. You can just put, you saw a bluebird. But you can use eBird to be more scientifically useful. That could be used by the scientists. Remember, you'll need to have an account on the eBird website before you can do this. So to use Merlin, just to review, you start bird ID, you find the bird, you go through, the clues, the size, the shape, the color, what it was doing. You find your bird, and I had one of these in my yard the other day, painted bunting. You click, this is my bird, and then instead of going to eBird, you click Save with Merlin, and then you now have a bird saved on your Merlin. To use eBird, you need to download the free app, and the app will track the date, the time, the location, and distance for you. So you don't have to worry about any of that. And you can submit it from your device, or you can have, there's another option. You can record it on your device, and you can submit it other way too. So you can also use the eBird website. If you just use the website, you're not using the app, you'll have to keep track of the date, the time, the location, and how far you're traveling. And you don't have to travel far. You can do what's called a stationary count, where you just basically stay in the same area. You can count any bird that's wild that you can identify by sight or sound. But if it's like, a chicken or someone's parakeet that's on a porch, you can't use those. And if you can't identify what a bird is, don't worry about it. This was a bird I saw one day, and it was backlit, and there was no way to tell what it was. So I couldn't count it, and that's okay. You can't count everything. Now, something you need to remember when you're birding, because we want to make sure we're not doing any harm to birds, if you're watching a bird and it stops doing whatever it was doing, it might have been eating, it might have been resting, it might have been preening its feathers. If it stops its behavior, you're too close. You need to back up. You need to stay on trails and off private property. Don't get too close to any bird nests. Don't play bird calls. And this is what I tell students. If you're doing as a whole class and a group, you're out kind of together and a group sees a bird, tell the others not to go running up because, of course, the bird will fly away. So to walk up slowly and quietly and that everyone can enjoy it. If you do plant it, maybe you have multiple classes throughout the day. If you're going to do multiple counts, you do separate checklists for each one. Okay. And I'm going to do a quick tutorial about how to use eBird mobile in case you want to do it that way. So if you do eBird mobile, it's the free app. You download it ahead of time. And then when you're ready to start, you'll see the screen. It will either have a start checklist or submit. It also has this record track. Have that turned on, and that keeps track of like your steps and how far you're going. So you click start checklist, and then there's a place to get location. If you click that, it'll come up with a map or what's nearby. Or if you've done multiple checklists, it'll have your recent ones. And then you're ready to go on that. And then simply when you see a bird, you click on the left side of the bird's name to add how many you've observed. So if you see a black-bellied whistling duck, you see one, you click one time. If you see more than one, you can change it to a 2, so on and so forth. You keep track of how many of each species that you've observed. If you downloaded the Merlin app, you can click to the right just to double check. It'll come up to Merlin and you can look at the picture, you can listen to the sound, you can make sure the ID is correct. You can also go back if you actually, your finger slipped and you hit 200 instead of 2, you can click that out and change it so you don't have it incorrect. All right, and the easy way to find a bird on the list is to type the first few letters of its name. So if you saw goldfinch, you can type GOLD at the top and it'll come up instead of looking through the whole list, because that can get kind of tiring. Now, if you notice, if a bird has R in a little square by its name, it means it's rare for your location, either because it's not supposed to be where you live or it's rare for the time of year. So here are some snow geese, and actually we saw these today, and they are considered rare for our area of Florida. So if you have a rare bird and you're really fairly certain about it, the next slide will show you what to do. So you do have to write a comment about exactly describing what you saw. Now, if you have able to take a photo, you can put the photo in later. You can't put it in on your app, but that's something else you can do. This is kind of advanced. So if you're not ready for this and you see something rare, you can, skip this. But if you want to, if your students feel really pretty certain that they saw something rare, it's fine. They can put it in. You can write the description. And if the eBird reviewer feels like maybe you were incorrect, they'll email you, and it's okay. It's all part of learning. So when you finish your bird count, you click review and you make any changes. Like if you accidentally hit the wrong name or something, you can fix it at that point. And if you forgot to put the location, it'll have this little warning, and then you can put your location in. And once your list is ready, you click submit right down here. And then you're done. You could also do the same thing on the website. And what's really cool thing you can do is that you can have it project up on your screen. So you could keep the checklist on your phone or on a paper list, and then go back to the classroom and go through, and the online is the same as the phone, except you have to put in the mileage and the location and all that. And then you have the students say, well, how many robins did we see? How many white crowned sparrows did we see? And they tell you, and you put it in and you hit submit, and they can see that it got, sent to the scientists. And it's a really cool thing. So we're out of time for questions, but let me go to the next slide and share with you about our next webinar, which is supporting student investigations, which is January 4th from 7 to 7:30. This one ties in so well with your standards, so I hope you can join us. If you have any questions, my contact information is on the next slide. I also want you to know that eBird does have a free, I think it's a 1-hour class you can take on that Bird Academy site. It's free if you really want to more in depth on how to use eBird, but it's great. It's a fairly easy citizen science project, and you can do it as often as you'd like, and you'll find your students will be very motivated. So thank you for joining me for this training. It will be online. Share it with your friends, and I hope you and your students get out and look for birds and help contribute to science. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.